Welcome to the Get Fit Guys, quick and dirty tips to slim down and shape up. My name is Ben Greenfield, and I'm the Get Fit Guy. Now, today, we're going to talk about a fairly interesting topic that you might not think at first glance is relevant to you, but that is actually important for anyone who's ever struggled for breath during a workout or wants to increase their oxygen capacity, get better lungs, avoid altitude sickness, or just figure out how to get a better workout and increase performance, even at high altitudes. Now, the Sherpa population in Tibet is world-renowned for their extreme levels of high-altitude fitness, often easily conquering Mount Everest climbs alongside seasoned and extremely fit climbers. You may have actually seen Nepalese Sherpas parodied in a popular Simpsons cartoon. I'll link to the cartoon in the show notes. It's actually pretty funny. Homer Simpson attempts to climb a difficult peak, and the quote-unquote lazy Sherpas drag him up the mountainside at night in his sleeping bag as he snores away. However, Sherpa altitude performance capabilities aren't just the stuff of cartoons. A recent study actually found a mutation in the Sherpa population that allows them to have increased levels of an enzyme that's responsible for helping your cell's powerhouse, what's called your mitochondria, to use oxygen to produce energy. But what if you're not a genetically superior human being with increased oxygen utilization capacity? Are there other ways that you could get the lungs of a mountaintop Sherpa? Well, you bet. And in this episode, you're not only going to discover how to stop struggling for breath during your workouts, whether they're at altitude or at sea level, but you'll also learn how to increase your oxygen capacity, increase the size of your lungs, avoid altitude sickness, get a better workout, and increase your performance whether you're at high or low altitudes. So why is it that it's so hard to exercise once you get up to altitude or if your lungs are out of shape? Well, recently, many of my friends and the athletes I coach competed in the inaugural Ironman Lake Tahoe triathlon. This event turned out to be one of the most difficult races on the face of the planet, with the highest dropout and did not finish, or DNF, rate of any other Ironman triathlon event. It may not come as a surprise to you that the 6,500-foot elevation of Lake Tahoe played a relatively significant role in the difficulty of that event. But you don't need to be doing an Ironman triathlon to experience the difficulties presented to your body by being at altitude or having limited lung capacity. Just a few weeks ago, I attended a wilderness survival camp which took place at 9,000 feet in Colorado. Despite my higher-than-average levels of fitness, I was huffing and puffing heavily within just a few minutes of hiking at this elevation. So why is it so hard to exercise at altitude? While there are entire books, which I'll link to in the show notes, devoted to the topic of altitude and exercise, the basic problem is that there's significantly less and less oxygen in the air as altitudes approach about a mile or higher, around 5,000 feet or so. And as a result, your body simply has less oxygen available to fuel your brain, your organs, and your muscles. In other words, the air truly is thinner. Now, the first thing that happens when you get exposed to this thinner air is that your respiratory rate and your heart rate speed up, whether you're resting or you're exercising. And for many people, altitude sickness can also result from that, with uncomfortable headache, fatigue, stomach illness, dizziness, and sleep disturbances at altitude. Unfortunately, exercise and moving around can aggravate these issues even more. The cool thing is that many of the things that you can do to get rid of altitude sickness or to make you perform better at altitude also help you if you just find yourself huffing and puffing when you go to your gym at whatever altitude you happen to be living at. So here's how to get better lungs. Whether you plan on exercising at altitude, climbing Mount Everest, visiting a friend in Colorado, or you just want to have better oxygen carrying capacity for your workouts anywhere, I've got 4 quick and dirty tips to help you get the lungs of a mountaintop Sherpa. Tip number 1 is to eat iron-rich foods. Your red blood cells use iron to help deliver oxygen to muscles, so if you're low on iron, you may experience anemic-like symptoms whether you're at altitude or sea level. In addition to doing things like cooking with cast iron, you can also review some of the best iron-rich foods on the face of the planet in a link to a website called whfoods.com that I'll put in the show notes for this episode. And these foods would include things like lentils, spinach, sesame seeds, dark leafy greens, thyme, oregano, and of course, steak. Number 2 is to use hypoxia, resisted, or restricted breathing. Now, one of the strategies that I've written relatively extensively about is this concept of using a variety of different fitness devices to challenge your lungs and your body with altitude simulation. These strategies include wearing a resisted breathing mask, also called an altitude training mask, using a resisted breathing device, also known as a power lung, swimming using a snorkel with restricted airflow, sleeping in an altitude tent made by a company such as Hypoxico, training with a hypoxic air generator made by that same company, or even using proper breathing patterns throughout your workday, specifically a habitual, deep, diaphragmatic breathing pattern. I've written a few articles about this type of stuff, and I'll link to them in the show notes for this episode over at quickanddirtytips.com. Tip number 3 is to hydrate. As you've already learned, the atmosphere at higher elevations contains less oxygen and lower pressure. This can cause water to evaporate from your lungs and skin more quickly than if you're at lower altitudes. You also evaporate water from your lungs and your skin more quickly when you're working out, period. Now, when combined with your higher heart rate and your faster breathing rate, this can result in a fast track to dehydration. So staying properly hydrated at high altitudes is important, and you should make it your goal to never go thirsty. This same rule actually applies during regular altitude training as well. This often, though, if you're at altitude, can require you to drink nearly twice as much water as you're used to. Of course, even if you're not at altitude, adequate levels of hydration are going to make your workout much more comfortable. And for more on this, my friend, the Nutrition Diva, has a fantastic article on how much water to drink. I'll link to it in the show notes. Tip number 4 is to use natural supplements. Specific natural substances have been clinically proven to help alleviate altitude sickness and to assist with oxygen capacity. For example, rats who have been dosed with vitamin C can endure higher altitudes in laboratory simulations at levels of vitamin C intake of around 2 to 3 grams per day, being the equivalent in humans. And that's a lot more than you get from just a few pieces of fruit, so you actually would need to use a vitamin C supplement. Antioxidants such as vitamin E, glutathione, and alpha-lipoic acid have all been shown to have a similar effect as vitamin C. The amino acid called L-glutamine can also have a protective effect on your body when you're at high altitudes. Finally, what are called adaptogenic herbs like rhodiola and ginkgo biloba can also help with lung function and oxygen carrying capacity at both sea level and altitude. I'll put links to some good studies that support this evidence in the show notes over at quickanddirtytips.com. Now, if you combine these 4 strategies to eat iron-rich foods, use hypoxia, resisted, or restricted breathing, to hydrate, and to use natural supplements, then you're going to find that you breathe much more easily during your workouts and you handle altitude better too. I would highly recommend that you combine these tips with a good training program as well, however. And for doing that, I'll put a link to my top recommended workout for becoming a better athlete in the show notes to this podcast over at quickanddirtytips.com. Now, if you have more questions about any of these things that I've talked about today, then you can leave your question or join the discussion over at facebook.com/getfitguy. And until next time, this is the Get Fit Guy asking you, what are you waiting for? Go get fit.